scholarship. So it's an investment of the seminary in the world of scholarship that other schools are finding they don't do anymore, or perhaps they only publish it digitally. We still publish it actually in a hard copy form. We offer it digitally, but you can still get it through the mail as a hard copy.
You're listening to the Forum Podcast, a production of Calvin Theological Seminary.
Dr. Maag, welcome back to the Forum Podcast. Thanks for being here today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
So we talked about your honorary doctorate last time, but today we're going to talk about the Calvin Theological Journal.
Yes, indeed.
Tell me a little bit about how you came to be the editor of the journal.
So this happened just about 9 years ago. And the person who had been the previous editor of the journal, because essentially it's a faculty member at the seminary that takes charge of that role, and the previous person was retiring, and so they were looking for a new editor, and I believe it was Professor Ronald Feenstra and Professor Mary Vandenberg who came to my office as a team to convince me that what I really wanted to do with my life was to become the new editor of the Calvin Theological Journal. I hadn't previously thought about this particular undertaking, but when I did think about it, I actually was quite eager to do it because I thought it matches a lot of my skills and interests. I have a real interest in helping people develop their skills in research. That's one of the reasons why I do the research methods class, and I don't think of it as a punitive assignment. I really enjoy it because there's something about fostering the abilities of people who are maybe starting out in their academic career or are trying something for the first time in terms of writing an article. And I get to walk alongside them, mentor them, and help them to make this piece of writing the best they can actually make. So I thought about it, I prayed about it, and then I said yes, because I thought it could be something I would really enjoy and could do a real service to the seminary in doing that. So I've done 9 years. I'm almost coming into my 10th year of being editor.
That's awesome, and so fun that it's been able to combine so many of your different interests and teaching experience. Tell me a little bit about the journal. What is its mission, and how does that connect more broadly to the seminary's mission?
So the journal started in 1966, and I have here a copy of the journal from the first volume, first issue from April of 1966. So we're coming up on the 60-year anniversary of the journal. And originally it was intended to foster the best of Reformed scholarship in the field of biblical studies and Reformed theology and history, and really offer a venue for colleagues who are either faculty here or faculty elsewhere to publish their research in these fields and really showcase, let's say, the best of Reformed scholarship. That was the original intent. Over the years, I think that mission has sustained itself, has continued. We are open to hearing from people from different perspectives. Not everybody has to, articulate a 100% Reformed mindset, because sometimes you learn a lot by hearing what someone from another perspective might actually have to say about important topics. So, for instance, we've had some work done by scholars such as Dr. Keith Stanglin, who's probably North America's leading expert on Arminius, right? So that's not the Reformed side. That's kind of the other side, at least in the Calvinist world.
Yeah.
And he wrote for us a very fine article a few years back on Arminius and why knowing about Arminius from an Arminian perspective really matters, and why that helps, in fact, Reformed people understand their own history more significantly. And I'm glad that we do this. I'm glad we have a variety of voices that we hear from. So the writers include faculty from this seminary, but from other seminaries as well. PhD students at other schools can write journal articles for us. And then I'm also, as well as editor, I'm also the book review editor. So I have two different roles. In the past, this was often held, one person was editor, another person was book review editor, but I actually do both. And that has allowed me to open the doors to a lot of our students to publish something for the first time as a book review.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting to hear you talk about that. It's primarily that venue for Reformed scholarship, but that you're also open to hearing from other perspectives, viewpoints, persuasions. I will have to go read that article on Arminius now.
Yes,
sounds
absolutely
fascinating and something that I probably have never read or thought to read. So you've talked about this a little bit, but what do you see as the core purpose of the journal in the broader academic community? You've got I don't even know how many academic journals out there at this point, but what's the purpose of CTJ in that broader community?
So here's an interesting factor. In fact, the number of especially theological journals, and this is a peer-reviewed theological journal, so it has quite a bit of heft, they are shrinking because it's very expensive to publish journals, right? The seminary underwrites this quite significantly. This is not a moneymaker for the seminary, but it is something that we can contribute to pastors, to professors, to faculty at other schools, to graduate students that really benefit from being able to access this scholarship. So it's an investment of the seminary in the world of scholarship that other schools are finding they don't do anymore, or perhaps they only publish it digitally. We still publish it actually in a hard copy form. We offer it digitally, but you can still get it through the mail as a hard copy. And we surveyed our readers a few years ago, and a number of them said they really liked the fact that it came to them in a hard copy, that they could sit in their armchair with the journal and really peruse it carefully with it in their hand.
I love that. And to know that that print medium hasn't gone out of style yet, too. I love that. Are there any particular research trends, areas of study that you as an editor are trying to actively promote? Like what does that look like for an average issue or volume?
So it's a really interesting thing. People can submit articles to me or article submissions at any time. So there's not like a particular time of year where they have to come in. It's a rolling submission situation. And we don't really do theme issues. There are other journals that do that. And they have a theme, and then you have to submit according to the theme. That's not really been something that CTJ has done. Sometimes themes emerge because you end up having two contributors talking on something fairly similar. So, for instance, this past issue, the April issue, had two different articles on the English Puritan William Perkins. Now, it wasn't planned. We didn't think, oh, we'll have a Perkins issue, but it happened that I had two articles in the pipeline, both dealing with different aspects of Perkins' thought, and that worked really well together. So I try to do certain things to bring things together. So what you have to understand is to do a journal like this, you have to work a lot in advance, right? So we publish twice a year in April and November. But it's not like, okay, now we're in May, that I'm thinking about, oh, I got to find some articles for November. I've actually been working for over a year with people who are going to submit, whose papers will appear in the November issue. So we're working 6 months to a year in advance. So that allows me sometimes to put things together that might not otherwise have connected in the same way. So there's no particular theme approach. The only theme approach I do deliberately is when I became editor, it was also the time where the denomination had stopped producing sermons for reading. It was something they used to do in the denomination where sermons would come out and people could access these. Now I guess you go to the website and talk to Scott Jose about the work that they do. But what I've done now in each issue of the journal, I've included as many times as I can a sermon that relates to the theme of one of the articles. So I know what articles I have coming up. I think, okay, this looks interesting. Then I contact a pastor in the denomination. I ask them, do they have a sermon on this theme? Hopefully they say yes. They send me the sermon. And then we have something that connects the academic content of the journal article with a reflection through Scripture on a particular passage of Scripture. And that bridges the gap sometimes also between the academic world and the world of the church.
I love that so much. Have you had a particular instance where you've had a sermon that you absolutely love that's connected really well to an article in the journal? Or
yeah, so that's what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to see if I can make that fit. So it depends. There's some people now. Probably more recently I found this problem that we have pastors who preach without text. In other words, they work from notes or extemporaneously. And then they can't provide me with a text. They say, well, you could listen to the recording and transcribe it. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm not going to go write your manuscript. No.
More work than I care to do. I think I did it once, but it's very time consuming.
Yeah.
So that I haven't done that too much. So the way of preaching changing has also made it sometimes a little more challenging. Fortunately, there's enough pastors who still write out their sermons either at the time or afterwards, and then I can tap them. And I'm trying also to connect with a range of pastors from the denomination to show the richness in the denomination. So older pastors, younger pastors, males, females, people from Canada, people from the United States, pastors whose background is from another country entirely, just to show that within the denomination we have this wonderful array of gifts among our pastors.
That's wonderful. You've hinted at this a little bit in that recent answer, but so much of academic technology and research has changed a ton, even in the past decade. How has the journal kind of kept up with that, if at all, and what have been some of the challenges of keeping up with such quick advancements?
So there are challenges. I now ask every person who submits a journal article whether their article has been published in whole or in part, including electronically, before it came to me. Because I discovered sometimes that people would say, well, I published this as part of something on a blog, and now I'm going to put it into an article form. And I need to know that. And that's where the technology, fast-moving technology changes. You have to be on top of that. So now I get them to tell me, has this appeared in any way, in part or in whole, in any form, including electronically? Just because what you want to publish is new research. You don't want to rehash something that's already been done. So that's one of the places that technology can kind of come in a funny way. The other thing that can happen is, with AI, you have to be aware that it's possible that in most cases, it doesn't affect the articles, because people would be taking a huge risk if they tried to have their article written by some kind of artificial technology. That would be akin to plagiarism or akin to cheating in some ways, and it would be really very problematic.
Absolutely.
So I don't really think that's one of my worries. But what is interesting is how much of a market is there yet for long-form article publications when people can read, a snappy little blog post or something like that. But what we're offering is quality research, not I thought about this over breakfast and I wrote it down, but here's some substantive research that I've done. And so far, it seems the market for this is holding.
That's so interesting. I once tested AI just to see how well it could write a paper, which I know a lot of profs here at the seminary have even done assignments like this where they'll say, like, I want you to actually use AI to try to have it write a paper for you. And I was looking at it, I was like, this isn't even accurate. And you can't even produce the level, the length of what I need. And, well, I guess we're going to be able to tell a lot more clearly, like, what's been AI generated, what's not been. But that's still a massive challenge with writing today.
It is. And I think it's probably more a challenge for profs working with students, especially perhaps at the undergraduate level, than it is for work that I'm doing, I think, at least, as far as I can tell. But, for sure, some of my work goes a lot quicker because of the technology, right? You can imagine in the olden days, as it were, that people would submit a typescript and you'd be reading the typescript and then they would have to retype it if you wanted to make changes. So it would be very laborious, right? Now with the various techniques we have, the whole process of reading somebody's work, giving them feedback, them making changes, sending it out for peer review, getting that feedback back, it goes chuk, 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 chuk. It just moves along pretty swiftly, which is nice.
That is super nice. So you've already held up one of the journals that are in front of you. But I'd be curious to know, how has the journal evolved or changed over the past almost 60 years?
So it is fascinating. So the way that they worked things at the beginning, and I think it is still the case now, because it was intended to be a vehicle for Reformed scholarship, the professors of the seminary were encouraged to publish in the journal, and they still do, and that's great. So that hasn't really changed. What has maybe changed more is particularly the book reviews and how they're assigned. So I'm told that when this started, they wanted to have book reviews, and they had a committee of professors who sat together in a room with the books available for review, and then they essentially farmed them out to the people that they thought were most likely to be reviewers. So you could imagine you're a professor at the seminary, and suddenly in your box you have 3 books that your colleagues think you should review. We don't do that anymore. We don't do it by committee. We don't farm books out. We let people choose what they think they are interested in. I think that is probably a better approach. There are difficulties with making assumptions about what people might want to do or not do, what books they would like, even if they're willing to do a review. It can actually be harder now to get faculty to review books. Students are very willing, because for the students it's like a step on the ladder of publications. For faculty, and this is not just Calvin Seminary, it's across the board, everything you publish has a weight, and some things have more weight than others, right? A book is like the best thing. A single author book. Yay, that's the top level. After that, scholarly articles are valued. Being an editor of a collection of essays, that's pretty good. Translating something, less probably interesting. Publishing the writings of someone else, that's kind of in the middle there. But book reviews for a lot of colleagues who are already on the faculty is way down in terms of I don't necessarily need to do this. But fortunately, we have a number of colleagues who still like doing it and are interested in doing that. And as I said, I have a great stable of student reviewers now. And then colleagues at other places who are interested. Sometimes emeritus professors who have retired but want to keep their hand in. They are good reviewers for me as well.
I love that. And I love that the approach has changed from cherry picking essentially the book reviewers to let's let people pick what they're interested in. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that also improves the quality of the review as well. Because if you can pick, no, I'm interested in this topic, and you have a book, that level of passion and engagement with the book is maybe going to be there in the review in a way that it might not be for someone else.
The only thing you have to watch out for, and this is a decision I took as editor when I started, as editor and book review editor, you have to be careful that people aren't picking a book or even writing an article for the wrong reasons. And that I would say to target someone else. And I made a decision as editor that I would not publish anything that was an attack against another person, because that can happen, right? Sometimes it can happen with a graduate student who wants to show how good they are by knocking down someone else. Sometimes it can happen if someone finds a book that they think is really, really bad, and they write. I had one review sent in, which is a very funny review, but it was extremely critical of the person writing the book. And I said, no, I will not publish this. And I've said this a number of times. And sometimes the person on the other end is a little surprised, like they feel this is not very usual. But to me, there's got to be something significant about saying we are a Christian school publishing a Christian journal. If our behavior is no different than any other institution, and if we foster the kind of ad hominem attacks that can be part of the academic world, I don't think that's right. I don't want to be that kind of person. I don't want us to be that kind of institution. So I've basically said this is how it'll be as long as I'm editor. If the next editor does things differently, then that's up to them. But I made a decision. I made a pretty strong decision at the start. This is what I was going to do.
I think that's a great decision to come to. And I mean, I'm sure it not only maintains, once again, like the journal's reputation, the school's reputation, but it upholds God's reputation as well. It's like we're not going to promote attacks on other people or unkind language just because, like, pretty sure the mandate is clear in Scripture. Like, no, maybe we shouldn't treat people that way.
But it's something that's countercultural in the
Absolutely,
academic world. Because there are some trends in academic scholarship that you get points for knocking somebody else down.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the right way to do things. And I basically said, no, we're just not going to do that. So I had one quite recently it was a jointly authored piece, and it was a critique of someone else's scholarship. And I basically said, no, we're just not going to go there. And they accepted that. They were a little surprised, but they said they understood what my policy was, and that was fine. But I really want to promote scholarship that fosters the good, not that tries to knock other people down.
Yeah. You've already answered this question a little bit, but could you tell me a little bit more about maybe some of the joys and the challenges of being the editor? You've kind of described the work you do, but what are the joys and the challenges of that work?
So one of the joys is working with an author from start to finish. So someone sends in, it could be a book review, it could be an article, and I see promise in it, but it's got a lot of problems, right? Maybe the language isn't too well, maybe it's not written very well, maybe the argument's a bit weak, maybe there's some sources they haven't considered. And to be able to walk with someone from the first submission, which is a little shaky, to a final product which is distinctly better, that's very gratifying. And they feel it, and they're appreciative, and I could see the progress. That's really good. Conversely, my most difficult experiences have been with people who don't take feedback. And you're like, okay, I'm not sure why we're doing this. The worst I had was a submission that came in, and I I'm very thorough, right? You send me something, I will give you a lot of changes. And this was an article, and I went through it, the whole thing, with suggestions about how to improve things, what to change, and so on and so forth. Well, then I heard nothing, which is already very odd. And I tell my students, do not do this. If someone has given you feedback, the first thing to do is to acknowledge it and to say, yes, I'm taking it on board, and then send a review. Nothing. Silence. Crickets. Absolutely nothing. About 8 months later, the person got back in touch, and they said, I have this submission, and I've worked on it, and I'd like to have you look at it. And I assumed that meant they had worked through my feedback, and said, fine, send me it, and they did. It was the exact same thing as they'd sent me the first time. And by now, steam is coming out of my ears.
Oh, no.
Because I'm thinking, okay, either you lost the first version I sent you and you don't want to admit it, or you never looked at it. I don't quite understand what's going on here. So I wrote back and I said, okay, there's a big problem here. I am not going to reread this and give you feedback the second time round. I already did this. See my previous file. I sent it back to him. And then it just went from bad to worse. I mean, he didn't take anything on board. And at the end of the day, I had to say, I'm sorry, this is just not working. We cannot keep going like this. So the hardest ones have been people who cannot take feedback, where either they're not taking on board what I'm saying, or they simply think their way is the right way, and they're just going to keep on going that way. I had one also, a review where I gave feedback and it came back and it was worse than before. And I wasn't sure how that was happening. And that happened like twice. It was a book review, and I had to call it off. I said, no, I think this is not for you. And I wanted to be kind, right? It was also someone whose first language was not English, and we were working very hard together. But it seemed to be a more fundamental problem than a linguistic problem. It was as if what I was saying was just not connecting somehow in some very basic, beyond language problem, some very basic form. And I had to say, I think this is not for you. This is not what you should be spending your time on, because it was not making any progress. So those are unfortunate, but they don't happen very often. The other ones that I found, which are very hard, is if you find plagiarism. And that's very difficult. Sometimes, again, it's maybe folks whose previous experiences in their home countries have been somewhat different about how you use and acknowledge sources. But there's no wiggle room there. It's not a possibility to say, oh, well, never mind, right? With a student, if it happens the first time, you can say, okay, this is what's wrong. This is why it's wrong. Don't do this ever again. And you kind of scare them into that. But with a submission, I can't. So I just abort at that point, and we can't go any further. And that's hard. That's hard for them, and it's hard for me. But I hope it's a learning experience for them.
For sure. We may have people listening to this podcast that are thinking about writing for the first time, either for maybe a popular level like blog, or even for a journal such as CTJ. As an editor, what are some of the key characteristics and features of a good writer that makes you want to work with them and continue working with them?
So what really helps is if the person has a capacity for analysis. In other words, what doesn't work is people who simply want to recount something, like straight narration. That doesn't really work at the level of a book review or a journal article. I don't want you to retell me what the book is about. That's not analytical. That has no... you could go to Amazon and look at the chapter descriptions if you want to know what the book is about. You know, in chapter 1, they did this. In chapter 2, they did that. It's really not interesting. And you have to have a capacity for analysis. You have to have a capacity to grasp what is essential, to see how the arguments and the thesis statement come together, to see how the materials used bolster or challenge the argument. Having that ability, having an analytical skill, is probably one of the first things I look for. In other words, is this person showing that they have a capacity to grasp what the main issues are and to articulate these in a relatively winsome fashion? Most everything else is fixable, but if you don't have that capacity, you're going to really struggle. So I look for that. I look for the analytical ability. I look for someone who is clearly interested in the topic that they're working on. And that's harder to sort of quantify sometimes what that actually looks like. But you can tell when someone is really engaged in the writing, that they find it fascinating. If they find it fascinating, it's quite likely other people will find it fascinating as well, because that's contagious. And so an eagerness to show why something matters, I think, is another important characteristic.
How about the editorial side of things?
So in terms of their receptiveness to my feedback, that's obviously very important. Their willingness to understand if there's a problem with the sentence, that it's not a problem with them. And my students also have to learn this, that a critique of your work is not a critique of you as a person. You have to be able to separate yourself from your work. Once a student or a submitter has got that difference, then it can work very well, because then they can receive the feedback. And I'm obviously not telling them, I'm not being hostile with them, but they have to understand that what I'm telling them is with the goal of improvement. And if we can work together on that goal, then we're in a good place.
That's fantastic. And thanks for sharing that advice. It's always helpful for people, especially those who are starting out, to hear that. Final question for you as we're wrapping up, but the journal is going to celebrate its 60th anniversary in 2026, you mentioned. Looking forward, what are your hopes for the journal for the next 60 years?
So I very much hope that the faculty of the seminary embrace the journal as their journal. What isn't going to work is if it becomes the work of one person. And that's why changing over editors regularly makes sense. So past editors in my time here, Calvin, John Bolt has done it, Lyle Bierma has done it, Ari Later has done it, and now I've taken over from Ari. I hope that we can encourage the faculty to really take on this journal as their product, something that they value, and that they don't just say, well, that one person over there, that's their responsibility. I think the journal flourishes when the whole community really says, this is ours, this is what we are connected with. And in that sense, the idea of having this committee who used to hand out the books, that is a way for the whole faculty to feel much more connected to it. But my hope going forward is that we can sustain the quality of the journal. I think it's been well regarded, and I'd like to see that continue. I'd like to see us continue to make especially the book reviews an opportunity for students at all levels. Some people have said, well, why do you let students who are, not even PhD students, why do you let them do book reviews? And I really want to give every student the opportunity, if they want, to work on a book review, because I think it's such a helpful assignment. And it feels great when you've got something in print with your name on it. You're really excited. And it can be a stepping stone to good things. So I'd like to see that continue as well.
For those who maybe don't know where to find CTJ, how do they find CTJ and connect with you guys?
So it is available as a print publication. If you wanted to get on the mailing list, you would contact the academic office and ask them to put in touch. Jennifer McCormick Bridgewater is the assistant for the journal, and she would put you on the mailing list. There is a small subscription rate, but it's not terribly expensive. We are also now sending it out digitally. So if someone says, I don't need it in print, I'd like the digital form, we can get them on for that. That works really easily too. Our mailing list reaches all over the world. We have subscribers from across the world, individuals and schools, libraries, seminaries, all of which receive the journal, and anyone can get that. If you're here on campus, you can pick up your hard copy very easily. You can talk to Jennifer. You can talk to me. We bring in extra copies, and we actually hand them out free, which is really fun.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for sharing more about CTJ. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.